Hey guys, and welcome to another video here for patch 9.6. Once again, I'm joined by Counterfeit. I'm Daedalus, and we're ready to take you through 9.6. Daedalus, are you ready? Counterfeit, are you ready?
Gosh, I don't know if I can be ready for you, but I'll be ready for me.
Well, let's just dive into the thick of things. So, Kale first up. So her attack damage growth and attack speed growth has been decreased, her W movement speed, radio decreased, and default adaptive swapped, E and W responsiveness increased as well. Yeah, well, Kale certainly has shown to be quite a scaling champion, to say the least. She's not really doing anything in the early game.
No, I think that's kind of perhaps unfairly influenced people's impression of her because she's so bad to start with. That I think it's taking time for the idea that Kale's very weak to kind of get out of people's impressions. Because from what I understand, is that now people have kind of learned how to play her. She's actually fairly strong, and the quality of life changes she's getting from her W and her E, I think, are significant. So in terms of particularly for the Celestial Blessing, that it doesn't disarm you anymore means that you can be chasing people with and whacking them, and the Starfire Spellblade means you can be hitting them for that execute damage a lot more easily. So even though she's losing out on some stats, which she possibly did need to, by the time those kind of really come into effect, it's later games, so it's a smaller proportion of your overall stat pool anyway. And I think the quality of life stuff is actually going to be significant. I don't think you could arguably say it is quality of life. It's I think it just makes her less clunky,
Yeah.
and so better.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you, Peter. Now, I must admit I haven't seen a lot of Kale, but I kind of get the impression that she's weaker than the old Kale, and that just kind of means that she's just going to take some time to get used to. And I really like those changes coming in as well, because just giving her some more power in the early game will make it easier for people to get adjusted to her, and they can always just revert the changes if they think it's too much. And I like that you mentioned the attack speed as well, because even though it is weird to see that being taken out, as you mentioned, it's not going to really come effective until the late game, and at that point she's going to have 4 or 5 items, and then she's going to be strong. But we also do have to mention that obviously Kale doesn't really fit into the current landscape where you want 1 and 2 items and then you want to go ham. She's more of the late game insurance, but the one that really doesn't fit in the current meta, because again, she's not going to give you any immediate power, and you're just giving up your lane completely if you pick her.
I do wish they figured out a way to have it be that she was that she did something early on, even if it was just a case of spamming her Q and kind of having her play differently at different parts of the game, rather than just not play at all for a good part of it. That just feels like kind of weird design, but what do I know?
Yeah, if you're not good at farming and you're not good at fighting, then Kale is your champion. You kind of need to be good at farming, right, in the early game, but you're not gonna get the chance because Kale just sucks.
Well, I think Scara said it pretty well, in that if you go even in lane, that you're doing well as Kale. So, I don't know. It seems a strange idea, but I'm glad we're trying different stuff, even if it doesn't necessarily come off perfectly the first time around, which I guess it probably was never going to.
Yeah. Well, moving on to Nico. Nico has seen a lot of play recently as an AD carry, and that is why they're nerfing her. So now you can no longer... Well, that was a bug. You can no longer proc the W twice in a row with very high attack speed. But also just that attack speed growth has been increased a bit. So you can still play her as an AD carry, but now she's not as nearly as bugged and as strong.
Well, you got to see this in the context as well of the hotfix. Yeah, so they decreased it from 3.5 to 1.5, and they also hit her attack damage growth, and also they took down the passive damage of shape splitter. So all of those things are still in place. So Shape Splitter, uh, like loses that 10 damage from level 2, 20 damage from level 3, 30 damage from level 4, and 60 damage from level 5. So she's only getting like a partial revert on the attack growth changes. Her attack damage is still lower.
It's not as high as 60, it's what, like 40, right?
Oh yeah, sorry, I misread it. Yeah, it's 40.
Yeah. But still, yeah, it is significant, and it really does take away from her power as an unhit AD carry. So while it's nice to get what, like 1% attack speed back, you still have the reduced damage, and she's not going to be as strong, but still definitely viable.
Yeah, I mean, she's weird in being a champion who's kind of viable everywhere, which kind of suggests that they've. I mean, if that doesn't tell you they've overloaded her kit, I don't know what does.
I think it. Not necessarily overloaded. It just feels like she doesn't have an identity because she can do so many different things. Like she has things that can go into the support role, but apparently they found out that, hey, we can also use her as an AD carry. I guess you can see it as overloaded. I just see it as kind of not having an identity with the abilities that you've given her, because you kind of have poke as a mid laner, but you also have engage for a support.
Yeah, well, I think we're kind of arguing the same thing from just different directions.
Yeah.
Which is, like, it's. I think particularly like the passive on a Shape Splitter, the encouragement to keep auto attacking things doesn't really feel like you've got the basic ability which does something kind of sort of related, but yeah, and
it doesn't really fit in with the idea that she should be a mid laner, because as a mid laner you want to auto attack, but when I think of auto attack mid laners, I think of Diana, Twisted Fate, people who actually have abilities that rely on their auto attacks. And then on Nico, you have a Q which is meant to poke. You're not really there to auto attack.
Well, it's as a kind of side note as well with Nico. Again, Scara had quite a lot to say about Nico in that her passive, like, isn't really getting used at all. Like her ability to disguise herself as other champions, which it's kind of a bit lame. Like, I think it feels like if they went back and did a bit more design work on Nico to maybe allow her to bring her whole chameleon aspect into play with some of her other skills in some fashion.
Yeah.
Like in terms of like there would be a way to like proc your passive or something, or set off your passive outside of like just walking back to lane.
Yeah.
It's kind of eh.
Yeah. It's certainly it certainly is. But then moving on to Ornn, he's just getting a lot of quality of life changes with his WB cooldown being decreased. You can no longer accidentally cancel E and R dashes by upgrading ally items. Q no longer expires if Ornn is mid dash. Kind of weird stuff that really shouldn't happen in the first place.
Yeah, I feel like the Q change is probably going to be the main one, but it's nice to get more usage out of the Bellows Breath. I guess, well, ties into what the next note will be, but from reading up on the kind of discussion around this patch, there's a good reason why Ornn players were still kind of annoyed by this patch, because you've got the whole idea that Ornn's not allowed to have a shield, but he's got a dash. But Urgot, who we'll see in a second, is allowed to have a shield on his dash, even though it's almost the same ability. So, hurrah!
Are you a salty Ornn player, Peter?
No, I'm
sure.
Honestly, personally speaking, I don't really mind either way, but I enjoyed their soul, and I brought it into myself, and now I can expel it. So I could be angry about something which I actually don't personally care about.
Okay.
But I appreciated their anger.
Their anger fuels you, so you're a Sith. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. Well, it's because the reasoning was so kind of compelling that even if it didn't actually really necessarily make that much sense.
Yeah, you're right.
I was like, I could argue that point, even though I don't believe it.
Yeah. Well, you're totally right, and see, you're right about the Q being the main thing here for Ornn. I also really like the Bellows Breath changes. Now, obviously, it's like half a second every time you put a point into it. But still, that half a second turns into 10 seconds at the highest level, so it is fairly significant in my head. But yeah. And
Yeah, I don't play a lot of Ornn personally. I don't know about you, but I think it's
I can play Ornn, but my Ornn is like my Tryndamere, Peter, and you have bad experiences with my Tryndamere.
I literally can't remember.
Well, I've told you this before. We played a game where I said, "Hey, Peter, I've played a lot of Tryndamere back in season 3," and you were like, "Okay, yes, but just go top lane," and I ended up dying like 12 times.
Well, I know that Ornn's been kind of struggling to find a little bit of his identity since they did steal his shield away.
Mm-hmm.
Those big old jerks. Looking at what people are playing or how they're skilling, it looks like Q was generally was getting maxed first on most of the builds. I can see.
You don't really have a reason to go for the W because you're not able to all in anyway with your E. You don't have a shield, so just having the safe poke with the Q makes more sense in my head. I think also mainly he's been played as a support nowadays, not really as a top laner anymore. Simply because you're allowed to upgrade your allies' items for free, basically. And you get upgraded items for free as well.
I'm trying to look to see if he's been used in competitive, and I'm not sure he has.
Oh, it's a long time. I think the last time...
he's used once.
Yeah, the last time I've seen him in competitive was... I think it's LCK.
Well, sorry, yes, this is on 9.5, so the stuff which has only come in the last couple of weeks. He's been seen once. I think he won. Yeah, he was seen once and won once, but yeah.
Nice, 100% win rate. This guy is broken.
Yes, unbeatable, literally.
Yeah, well, moving on to Urgot. Peter, there's a lot of changes to Urgot. Mana, passive, W shield has been removed, by the way. Cost cooldown, damage reduction decreased. Permanent toggle at max range. E now shields, damage and cost increased. A lot of big changes right here, Peter. So let's just dive into it to begin with. Base stats. What do you think about those? Mana going up and mana regen growth going up as well.
Well, I mean, so they kicked Urgot pretty squarely in the nuts previously, which is probably justified given how ubiquitous he was. I think honestly they showed a relatively admirable amount of restraint in not previously gutting him, just because I think that if you kind of imagine the old Urgot, which was one of those champions who was just horrific to play against, and was also horrific to play as.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of gotten used to this idea that Urgot was one of those champions that if he got good, they would just destroy. But I think they pretty much deleted old Urgot and made the new one. Sorry, this is a bit pointless. But yeah, I think this is the start of them trying to find a new identity for Urgot, and in this case, it's giving him back not a non-horrible mana pool. And this will also come into play with the other abilities later on as well.
Well, continuing in, the passive no longer deals 10% reduced damage to enemies hit in the last 5 seconds. You also have Purge, which now becomes a toggle at max rank. And you also have on-hit damage reduction going down. So, he's getting some changes here and there, and it kind of does feel like it's coming out in favor for him because he's getting so much damage back, especially on this R. And also with now that shield basically just being changed over to his E, basically just feels like he's really winning out in this trade.
Well, a lot of this stuff is intending to come together to motivate him to buy attack damage.
Yeah.
So the E being on his shield, which is where the whole fury of the Ornn players comes from, didn't used to have the bonus attack damage ratio from what I understand, but now has a pretty good bonus attack damage. So, but also retains its bonus health. So Black Cleaver's doubly effective in that regard.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, so you've got the two ideas at play. You've got the Purge, which is now going to, if you power level it, which I don't know if people will be.
I maybe. But Peter, I kind of feel like what you're coming towards is that they've made him stronger as a bruiser. Because it did feel like for a long time, or just from the last patch really, that he lost all of his power, and you only really saw him when people were like, Jarvan's not here, Sion's not a possibility, Aatrox still kind of sucks, let's just go for good old Urgot. And now you can still pick him up because he is not necessarily back, but at least he's stronger and can thus be a, well, just this pocket pick for some people.
Yeah, well, I mean, to go, sorry, just to go over the disdain a little bit more.
Yeah.
So there's this whole idea that rather than the purge shield being kind of like a trading thing, I do feel like you end up in a pretty different situation where your escape mechanism, such as it was, is tied to your shield. Though I'm not sure if really his dash was a very good escape mechanism because it stuns you and then dashes from.
Well, you kind of also use it as an engage tool, Peter. So now it just gives you a bit more power to go all in, which is also really his identity.
Oh yeah, no, I think like from previous Urgot to current Urgot, if you're using it to engage on people, I think it's almost indistinguishable because you probably would pop your shield when you engaged anyway. Yeah. So yeah, I'm not actually convinced that his E was a particularly good escape tool in the first place. So
I don't think it was designed to be an escape tool.
I mean, you could.
You could. Yeah, that's like saying Tristan's W is an engage tool. That's not really a thing.
Yeah, if you talk to Tristana players, then you'd be convinced of that.
Hey, I'm an AD carry main as well, and I see it as a mainly escape tool, but you can use it as an engage tool, and that's kind of what you're saying with Urgot too.
Well, you're definitely kind of small things to notice. With the E disdain, you're definitely motivated to not level it up because it becomes significantly more expensive to use, and the cooldown remains the same at every level. You get more damage, but I feel like maybe it's Q max into W max because you get the whole. I don't know what an Urgot looks like. I mean, because the various patch reviews I looked at were talking about it is almost like a rework of him, where he's now going to potentially, if you level up Purge, then you can just leave it on the whole time, and you've got you mentioned the on-hit damage reduction, so that's saying that you do more damage with your on-hit effects because he attacks so quickly out of Purge. So you could potentially build Blade of the Ruined King and other stuff on him, and have it be, more of a thing. Like, maybe we'll see more brews at Urgot. That's probably a good thing.
Yeah, I actually. Since you're saying that, I could actually see a world where they max W simply to go for the on-hit Urgot. Just go Black Cleaver or like Frozen Mallet into a Blade of the Ruined King, and then suddenly you kind of have this fighter identity of him. Yeah,
I could see that being a thing. Like, I hope it will be better. I'm really not in favor of champions doing lots of damage while also being ridiculously tanky. That seems like a kind of weird trade-off.
Yeah, it's definitely not healthy for the game. But then moving into symbol changes, Peter, because I know you're a symbol man and you kind of like this. Hey man, oh well, you're not necessarily a symbol man. You're a good man. Starting out, stop making weird face.
Not good. Yes, but what have you got against simple, straightforward, honest folk?
They turned up 20 minutes late for videos. Now,
I'm sorry to hear that.
Now Aatrox. Okay. He pulls targets even when they're untargetable, and his passive no longer cancels when reviving.
That's a direct to beat up Vladimir buff.
Yeah. And it's also
specifically
bug fixing, basically.
Well, I mean, like, I didn't realize it was supposed to do that in the first place, but yeah. The World Ender passive interaction, like, again, I didn't necessarily play enough Aatrox even, so they become links in my mind to realize that was even happening in the first place. But that's a chunk of damage if he's, if he gets the passive when he comes back out of it, which he wouldn't otherwise have.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well, I think that kind of changes it or covers it with Aatrox. Caitlyn, however, big fan of these changes. I think Caitlyn in herself is good in the current state that she's in. It's just that she doesn't fit in the meta where it's all about mid game, and Caitlyn, as everyone knows, doesn't really fit well in the mid game. She's more of a, hey, let me get 4 items and then I can wreck your towers kind of AD carry. Now with Ace in the hole, I don't think it's gonna make her become a stable pick in this current meta, but at least it's gonna give her some power to potentially be a pick, just because you can then actually deal more damage once you get level 6.
Yeah, I think it's alright. Like, I mean, one of the stated, well, they say it directly in the patch note, but one of the stated goals for the patch was to try and bring in more AD carry survivability, and I think that's probably a good thing. I feel like this is a bit of a blunt instrument to do this for Caitlyn, just to be like, oh, also she does 50 more damage. It's like,
well, what else would you buff at her? Buff from her, because you can't buff her pilled over peacemaker, because then she just becomes too strong in the laning phase, and then her whole identity is just shut down Vayne and Kai'Sa.
Well, I don't know if that's necessarily a terrible thing. Like, if her identity is supposed to be as a lane bully or lane dominant, then for her to, to sharpen in on that identity, I think it's alright. I don't know. It just feels like the least interesting way to buff her, but I mean, it's okay. It's just, I don't know.
Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah. I guess we kind of are agreeing for the same thing, Peter. But you're just saying I don't think it's very interesting the way that they're buffing her.
Yeah, I hope that I hope to not play against, but I hope we get to see more Caitlyn. I do think that she's horribly obnoxious to play against, but I don't think they're going to change that anytime soon.
Touche. Now, Gnar, W Wallop, cooldown decreased.
Yeah, nobody likes Mega Gnar because they buffed Mini Gnar a little while back, and you just don't want to stick in Mini Gnar now. Like, I don't know. I'm not sure this is going to be the difference between people wanting to have any kind of form of real ranged ability to interact with their opponent or not, but yay, I guess. Are people playing Gnar? I don't think so.
I don't think people are playing Gnar at all. Probably still a matter of him being not a very good bully in the top side, but also him not scaling well enough into the mid game, because you're not really going to be able to fight against people. It's a big change, to be fair, for the Wallop, so it does give more power over to his Mega Gnar. But even then, it's not really what you want. You just kind of want more damage, and that's gonna have to come from the Q or the W in the Mini Gnar form, and I'm not quite sure what that is called. Because it's not
Hyper.
Hyper, yeah. So that's kind of what you want as a Gnar player, if you are to be used more right now.
Well, I think like the only people who are still playing Gnar are those who kind of know what they're doing with him. I was just looking at the numbers for what they were. So 2% play currently, or slightly under 2% play, and 48.7 or 48.8% win rate in top lane, which is pretty.
It's not bad.
Well, it's on top of that, he's not been seen at all in any of the 9.5 competitive. So I don't know, like I don't think this is going to be the difference maker.
No, definitely not for competitive. For solo queue, it's fine. But yeah, so moving into Hecarim, Counterfeit. I love Hecarim as a jungler. I feel like he's always very interesting to watch when he comes out into competitive. And now with his Rampage getting changed so that it deals 10% additional damage per stack of Rampage, feels like he could potentially come out and be more of a bully in the early game. I definitely think he could have a spot in the game, because it's kind of just, he has some good gankings and he has, well, a fair level 6.
So, Daedalus, let my wannabe game designer show here a little bit.
Okay, hit us with some game designing.
Like, I do agree with what they're saying here, which is that the idea of Hecarim just charging out of the Fog of War and instantly killing you is really dumb.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't know if you've ever seen this movie because I can't think of what the specific movie is. But if you imagine like the sort of fantasy of Hecarim being this whole idea, because this is how I think he was built, which is why his rampage works this way.
Okay.
Which is that you have someone who kind of like, you have the centaur like, run up on someone and kind of like smack them in the side of the head and run up and past them and then kind of come back and smack them on the other side of the head. And you're like, oh my gosh, I can't get away from this person just staying on me, kind of whack, 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 whack. And you're like, this is the worst thing ever. But that's the kind of fantasy for Hecarim, is that he's kind of running you down like a dog. But if he just runs and instantly kills you, then his rampage doesn't even make sense because it's supposed to build up over time. So it's rewarding him for doing what his idea is supposed to be, which is that he sticks on you because he's so fast and you can't get away from him because he's just running you down. But I feel like that lends itself to something like an Alistair sort of thing, where you, by staying on somebody, you get a stronger and stronger effect, which is what you do to an extent with Rampage, but it's not obvious enough. Like, if you gave him the Alistair, 1, 2, 3, 4 stun thing, then you've got a very direct, oh, this champion's supposed to stay on top of the other champion and keep hitting them. I think it's really bad if Hecarim just turns into basically just the horse assassin, even though that's quite a cool combination of things. But I feel like Hecarim, if he can fulfill his design, it should be more focused around staying on top of two people and whacking them. So
Yeah. Okay.
that's more rewarding. It's good, and I hope we don't end up in a place where we get run over by horses.
Okay. Yeah, I can agree with you. I can definitely agree with you. But I think whenever he comes out as a horse assassin, that's when people build lethality on him, right? So, like, that's not the standard build. And I'm thinking in terms of competitive, I think this is a good change. But for solo queue, lethality is probably still the way to go.
Probably, yeah.
But for competitive, this is a good change that could bring him into the current jungle landscape. Simply because it gives him more reliability, and junglers, they want to have reliability on their junglers.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see. It hasn't been picked up in 9.5 at all as of yet. So
he got the changes in 9.6.
Yeah, but I'm just saying that there's not been any interest so far, and I get like the Gnar change. I'm not sure this is going to be the thing that makes people go, "Oh boy, this horsey face. This is the guy I want on my squad." Like, I don't know, maybe, but probably not.
Okay, fair point. But moving on to Ivern, okay, I'm trying to. You can see.
Is this a coincidence that he's getting a skin soon?
Dunkmaster Ivern. See, that is an interesting skin. But now for Ivern here in this patch, W more quickly empowers Ivern's attacks when he enters brushes.
I do apologize for that skin comment. That was a little bit too easy. I think the point of this being that, from what I understand, is that you can just cast on yourself more reliably now, rather than having to have the awkwardness of casting it slightly ahead of you.
I also think it's kind of just giving more or better time cleaning his jungle, because now when he enters a bush, he's gonna get, or a brush, he's gonna get the empowered attacks on his double or on his auto attacks. So kind of more reliable way of clearing the jungle.
Sure. I think I don't know, I'm not sure exactly how much more quickly. I assume it's like a relatively small amount.
Yeah, probably a small amount, but just a better experience, and I can imagine it probably shaves up maybe like 1 or 2 seconds.
I would add on to that, putting my amateur champion designer hat back on again. I feel like Ivern was a big experiment for Riot as to what could work on a jungler, and I feel like maybe they needed to go back to him again and kind of put some more serious time into being like, so here's the part of the ideas that kind of worked and some of the ones that didn't, because I feel like at the moment they're kind of like papering over the cracks with Ivern by just kind of making Ivern just better without really fundamentally changing anything about what he's doing.
Well, what do you think works for him? Since you're a game designer now.
I knew as soon as I started saying about this that I probably would have to actually explain myself, which is obviously the worst news ever for anybody. I don't know Ivern well enough. I just kind of I have the impression of his kit of just being kind of a bit all over the place.
His Q roots people, his W puts down a brush, his E is a heal, and his ult is Daisy.
I think I'd say like I think the brush maker stuff is good. Like I think that's a kind of a cool ability, and it does play into what his character is. I feel like you could probably take or leave the root caller or trigger seed parts of his kit, probably particularly the trigger seed, which is his shield. Like I feel like that's a bit arbitrary. Like that could be pretty much any ability, and it would still function. So I don't know. I don't know. The thing is, like, I don't actually know I've won enough to be able to really properly speak on it, but he just feels like his kit's just a bit. Mm.
Yeah, yeah, I get what you're saying. Though I must say that I actually think Iron works pretty well. I think the only part I can somewhat see being not related to his identity would be the Q, because he's not about violence, and the Q kind of, well, tells you to go in and smack someone. But I do feel like overall Ivan works. It's just that he's kind of like a Kalphas with less kill pressure.
Oh, I know what it is. You move his brush maker from being a active ability to just being his passive, and have him just create brush everywhere he goes. So instead of it having to be an active thing, just everywhere you move, like you have brush trailing you. So you'll like you stay in one place for a certain amount of time, you just grow up stuff around you, and then I mean I don't know again how that would all work, but I just feel like it's kind of just a bit of a weird ability. But
That feels very clunky to me, what you're suggesting, but I can see the idea.
well, I mean he doesn't really have a passive, so he could definitely afford to have one.
Well, what his passive is, what, like the thing with
His farming passive,
yeah, eating up.
but it
Junk
doesn't do anything outside of that particular
Mm.
interaction. So he doesn't have a combat passive at all.
All right, but to get back to the patch notes, Jace, health-related base stats decreased. Basically, Jace has been tearing up lanes in solo queue and in competitive, and now with him having less health, maybe he's going to have a harder time actually being a lane bully.
Yeah, well, I mean, like at least it means that if you can interact with him, which isn't necessarily the case for everybody, but if you can, that's going to stick a little bit better with him having less health regen.
Yeah.
It's kind of weird that he's not actually the most present of all of the picks. Lysandra is, so you won't see Lysandra in these patch notes, but Jace, I guess, is more considered to be a bad thing that he's doing what he's supposed to be doing, whereas Lysandra maybe isn't.
I think their problem is that Jace, as they write in the patch notes, is ranged and he has melee stats. Like they just need to make him squishier without making him too squishy, because he has to be able to move in, or you're never gonna see him use his hammer form. But you also have to make it so that he's open to being taken down, simply because he is safe, because he has the ranged advantage.
Yeah, like I definitely think it's a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Yeah,
he's another one of those champions who's kind of
me too, Peter. I like it as well.
well, good.
Moving on to LeBlanc, I quite enjoy this change, because I feel like when they first reworked LeBlanc, it was all about giving her back the identity of her being a trickster, being someone who has a lot of mobility. Because when you look at the old LeBlanc, you used to go for Deathfire's Grasp, and then you just bursted people down with the Q. And kind of after they buffed her Sigil of Malice back in a few patches ago, if I remember correctly, I think they buffed her at least. Her Q became too reliable a burst ability, but B, also a farming ability. And with them just taking down a dot one ability power scaling from her, it kind of makes her less reliable on that Q, and now having to make more outplays to find kills.
Okay, sorry, I just because I didn't have that much to contribute on that particular point. I was thinking about how you could try and narrow in on LeBlanc's identity as a deceiver.
Hmm.
And I just had the idea that
So you wanted to give her Nico's passive.
Nico basically just is a LeBlanc rework, but just with a bunch of other crap thrown in. Well, I was thinking that. Sorry, I'm going to be doing a champion design workshop with someone later on today, which is why my mind's in this place. But how about her Q? Okay, this is kind of a weird idea, but
Okay, hit me.
So imagine that you've got a double cast ability. So you cast it once, and then you cast it again. Both times you've got skill shots, but only so she fires out. You make Q into a skill shot, and you have it fire out 2 projectiles that are on slightly different trajectories to each other.
Yeah.
And one would be like, you'd have one which is a slightly different color or something to show that it's the fake one.
Okay. Yeah.
But you kind of see where I'm going with that in terms of like, then you've kind of got, you're always trying to try and psych out the other person with like, is the first, if you consistently throw out the first one as the real one, and the second one as, or the ones then you've got this kind of interaction pattern when you're spending the whole laning phase trying to psychologically mess with the other person.
Yeah, I get what you're saying.
I've never seen an ability like that.
It again, it seems like something that would be very clunky and not solo queue friendly unless you have like these crazy mechanics to really use it.
Yeah, it's. I think it would be awkward to use just as initially described, but I don't know. Like,
well, well, moving on to Nautilus, Peter.
Yes.
Do you love Nautilus?
So Freak ran the numbers on these, so I'm probably referring back to Freak.
You just ignored me. I asked if you love Nautilus.
I'm getting to that. Jeez.
Okay. Well, tell me how much you love Nautilus.
So, I don't know how this relates in real terms, but apparently the increase in armor is about a 2% damage reduction. So isn't probably going to be that noticeable. But the staggering blow, you can use that on jungle creeps. So jungle Nautilus, yes.
I wouldn't mind. I love Nautilus. I love seeing him in the top lane. I love seeing him in jungle. I love seeing him. He used to be played mid as well, and in the support role. He's one of my favorite champions just because his kit is so fun. You have the Q, you can hook people. You have the ult, you can stun people. It's fun.
It's very fun for you. It's definitely not very fun for the other person.
No.
It's worth noting as well for the staggering blow. Like, if that 6 seconds is not exactly very long, so you could conceivably get that off twice on someone a lot more, reasonably in the early game. Whereas I kind of feel like the 9-second cooldown, you probably couldn't do it twice on somebody. But now, if you're doing if you're having a fight the length of a lane, especially considering the dredge line and stuff to bring people back in again,
yeah,
I think that's a pretty significant buff to him. Though, I mean, no one was playing him at all, were they?
No. I don't think we've seen Nautilus for at least half a year, if not a year. But I could see this throwing him back down to the bottom side. Gives him the power of a fresh, while also being tanky as an Alistar.
Oh, actually, I think he's been seen a couple of times. I don't know, like maybe it was in sort of goofy games.
Probably in like minor regions, I could imagine.
Well, he's been seen twice and he's lost twice, so I don't know. Like,
right, so
maybe.
Do you know which regions?
He's from the top 5. Let's see. Not offhand, but it is from the top 5. So that's NALCS, EUS, LCS, LCK, LPL, and LMS. So it's not like he's completely unknown, but I suspect he's. If this is a matter of degree, I mean, like, these kind of simple changes usually are a matter of degree change.
Yeah.
Like, maybe there's a certain situation under which he's really good.
Well, Peter, moving on to Rek'Sai. We've seen a lot of Rek'Sai as of recently. Basically, Conqueror came in, then that got nerfed. Rek'Sai's ult got changed, and that's what they're changing now, simply because he started to build a lot of AD, so she got crazily good, and you can't dodge her R anymore. So it's very reliable, but it's just up too often.
Yeah, I mean, well, like, compared to all of the other junglers, I mean, looking at GOL.GG on this one, that she's a full, like, in terms of, like, champions who get played a reasonable amount,
Yeah.
like, she's way ahead of all of the other junglers. Like, her win rate is 60%, which is,
60?
yeah, which is, like, so that's a full
Holy.
10% more than Jarvan. Gragas has got 60. There are a lot of much lower play champions who've got comparable win rates, but when you're talking about a decent amount of games played, like she's much better than Java, much better than Nocturne, and Olaf, who I was under the impression was pretty good,
Yeah.
is actually, well, at least going by all of the 5 regions on 9.5 at least, has got an atrocious win rate. So I don't know. I think probably Rek'Sai. I know people are kind of like not particularly happy that Rek'Sai is getting nerfed so quickly, but I think she probably does deserve it.
I agree with you right there. I think Rek'Sai, basically with the way that she's been played, with her being so strong in the early game and her ult being so reliable, I think you definitely need to take it down a notch. I don't even think that it's a hard nerf, because it's what, like, there's 20 seconds on your third level of your ult, 10 seconds on the second, and you're losing .25 attack damage. It's nothing. There's nothing to complain about.
Well, I think the numbers worked out as it being like, I think wasn't that hard for that to account to be like around. I'm trying to remember what the numbers were, but it was a noticeable amount. But I think she can afford to lose it and still be. Like,
I think she's still going to be
totally
strong.
viable.
Yeah, she's still going to be the best jungler, or one of the best at least. But, well, Olaf, who you mentioned, could be played into her. He's mainly just a counter pick to a lot of junglers, and, well, Rexa now having less damage on her ult, less of a duelist, and Olaf could work against that.
Sure.
But then we have Shen, Q damage increased. Peter, tell me about Shen.
Well, Shen, a problematic boy. I get, one of the few true global ultimates. I know that they did like take a big chunk out of Shen a while back. I have to look up exactly what happened when because
he's also hard to balance because he just has everything in his kit.
Yeah, he's a weird one. Let's see. So previous history. So you have to go back to 8.14. Actually, wow, that's a long time ago. So back in 7.24, gosh, I can't even know what that was exactly. They reduced his Q damage down to 5 from 15, so they cut it to a third of its previous damage. Mm-hmm. So they're now only restoring it to halfway between where it was before. And they also nerfed the slow. So, I don't know, I guess they're trying to take baby steps towards making Shen viable again without having him be quite as silly as it was before.
Yeah.
Which is, I guess, I'm okay with.
Yeah. I don't mind it either. You kind of have Shen with his ult that's too strong, so you don't want to make his Q too strong either. It's kind of the Jay situation where you don't want him to be a bully, but you don't want to have him be too much of a tank as well. And yeah, well,
yeah, I don't know. Like, I kind of feel like his kit's a little all over the place, but
hey, he's an old school Nico or an Ivan in your head. But Peter, do you have more to add to Shen?
No, I think it's right. I would mention that that's what I thought it was. I was trying to remember because it's been a while since I've seen Shen. That I like that his Stand United has the scaling based on the target's missing health to reward you for using it skillfully, whereas Kael's W does not have that, and so therefore just is that much less interesting for the lack of it. That's all I got to say about that.
Nice. So basically complaining about Kael not being a skillful champion.
Scale not allowing for skill expression is
Okay.
maybe a better way of putting it.
Okay.
But I just thought I'd find a way to complain about Kale in any given situation.
Nice. Well, SYLAS, one of the last two
Boo.
champions here on this patch note. W base heal and heal ratio decreased. So basically, once SYLAS came out, people they figured out, hey guys, let's just build SYLAS to heal ourselves. Let's build him tanky, and that is what they're nerfing even more into the ground now.
Yeah, they probably need to. I feel like. Alright, I'm gonna come out and say it. SYLAS was a mistake. That's right. Controversial, maybe.
Can
Maybe
I
not
quote you on
controversial.
that?
Yeah, if you want to put it in the video title, then I feel like that's the clickbait we need to get people in. But yeah, like I feel like he doesn't with his identity as his character. Why does he have that? Why does he even have that ability? Like, it doesn't even make any sense in terms of that somebody came up with a really weak justification for it, and they're like, whatever, who cares?
Yeah.
Like, it's like he's resilient. That's why he has an arbitrarily huge heal. Like, come on. Like, he doesn't need that doesn't need to be a thing. He could just have something else, and he'd be totally fine. Like nearly every other top laner or mid laner gets by completely fine without a massive heal that just punishes you for doing stuff to him. I think actually, there you go, champ design hat. Just make it a Tam Kench style thing. So if you want it to be that he fights ferociously when he's in the corner, which I think is how they justified it being on his kit in the first place, just have it be a temporary shield, a Tam Kench Grey Health thing. So when he gets hit, rather than him getting healed, he gets a temporary shield. So he's not like, I trade with you and then I come out of that trade higher health than I started because of my stupid heal. Like, have it be that, he can fight ferociously when he's backed into a corner, fine. But don't have that also be a straight, complete heal, because that doesn't make any sense. I have nothing to really contribute about the balance, but it just annoys me that that's the thing.
You know what, Peter? I agree with you, and I think at least putting it down 25% will make it less easy for him to heal back up. But I think there's a long way to go. I think it's still going to be crazily stupid and strong, simply because it's .4 ability power percent or .4 ability power heal ratio, so that's strong, and you get that extra healing when you're below 40%.
Oh, just as an inside thing, I'm 100% certain that when they were playtesting it, and no shade on Ender, who is the only playtester I know, but I'm certain that when they were playtesting SYLAS, everybody was just kind of got the idea that maxing his Q was the way to play him. Because if they had been maxing W when they were playtesting him, I'm pretty sure that people would have been like, yeah, let's not do that. But anyway.
Alright, Peter, alright. Well, moving on to Trundle. W attack speed increased. Again, it's about trying to get more junglers into the current landscape, and his frozen domain is where Trundle wants to fight, so giving him more attack speed in the early game will give him a bit more damage to work with when he's going to fight against the likes of Jarvan, Lee Sin, Elise, and Olaf, and even a Rek'Sai.
I do love that Trundle has basically got a portable Skarner Spire. Just the whole idea that it's literally almost the same thing, except you just choose where you put it down, whereas Skarner has to fight around certain things. But I just think that whole idea is kind of funny.
But the thing is also, I think that it's a fine idea considering that Skarner has more crowd control and that Trundle is more about fighting all the time. So Skarner is more he's more of the control jungler, which Trundle really isn't. Or at least his identity isn't.
Well, that's what we mentioned. We were talking about Olaf a little bit earlier on. Trundle being one of those champions who actually can have a meaningful interaction with Olaf because you can stick the pillar up, and while the slow doesn't affect him, you can, he physically has to go around the pillar, so that's nice. And this is also not quite the second patch in a row, but almost. As in, it's two separated by one patch between them. But so 9.4, he had his mana cost and his frozen domain cut from 60 to 40, and the late game attack speed on it increased quite dramatically. So Like, I think he might actually be pretty decent now.
Yeah, I for one, I'm looking forward to seeing Trundle back in the jungle landscape. I am always a fan of that guy, especially because I'm a big fan of you having what you call utility, and I think his ult is a good way of buffing up an AD carry. Because you take away magic and armor from your opponent.
Oh, I see. Yeah, indirectly. Yes.
Yeah. Like you're not directly buffing up your AD carry. I just think that I just love the idea of you being able to use utility to buff up either directly or indirectly the other players on your team. But that's also the thing that Riot don't like. They don't like hidden passives, which I kind of do.
I honestly speaking, like, this is gonna be like half patch notes, half me just like randomly amateur champ designing. I think I don't like Trundle's art at all. Like, I feel like it's okay. Here's a concept.
Or it's not interactive enough for you.
Well, no. Firstly, like, so here's a proposition for you. You remember old Karma, where she used to tether onto people?
Mm-hmm.
Well, actually, no, she still kind of does that, doesn't she? So it's been such a long time since I've seen Karma being played that I've kind of forgotten. But imagine the idea that Trundle's ultimate connects him to somebody else. So it's the same idea, but he has a tethering line that connects him to another target, and the people can intercept that line. So as in he'll suck like resources, like resistances or health, whatever, from a given target, but people can physically interpose themselves between Trundle's intended target and Trundle and Trundle's intended target. Sorry. So you can there's a degree of like positioning and stuff at play in there. Like, I'm not suggesting that's necessarily a good skill, but I'm just saying that firstly, that makes it more obvious what Trundle is doing because he's physically connected to somebody else. And secondly, it means there's actually some kind of interaction on the other person's part, or the other team's part at least. Because as it stands, I feel like it's just a really blah ability.
You don't like it because it's not interesting.
Yeah,
See, I would suggest that if you want to change it around, and again, like, this would not be interactive at all either. But I think the way to go around it, if you want to make it more interesting and like make it so that he has to stick close to someone, just give him the Nasus treatment or the Renekton treatment, and make it so that he just has to stick close to people in order for them to lose their magic and armor, and then have it increase over time.
Weirdly enough, that's exactly what I was thinking as well. That it could be a AoE effect which just steals from people he can get near to.
Yeah.
Like, I think that would make sense. Like, and it would be a lot more readable as terms of what's going on. Like, you understand that as soon as you see him, like, probably grow in size, or that he would, like, start doing something.
Yeah, because all you have right now is particles coming out of the opponent towards Trundle.
That's not obvious enough at all.
Yeah. Well, I like the ult, but I can agree with you that it's not really... you don't see it enough. But then moving on to Saya, because I think we've rambled enough about Trundle. Her W attack speed has been increased.
Yeah, I think that's pretty big.
Again, like... it's just about bringing more AD carries into the meta. And Saya is... She's basically a worse Kai'Sa at this point.
Yeah, she's weirdly like... Actually, let's have a look at the kind of where bots stands at the moment. So yeah, she's just not there at all.
She isn't, and it's basically again because she is like Kai'Sa, but just worse. Because Kai'Sa has a shield, and all Saya really has in difference from Kai'Sa is a bit more CC, and that's not exactly what you want from an AD carry. I would rather have damage.
Yeah, I think it's good. Also, considering that you've got to put this in the context as well, that they're sort of undestroying Rakan currently as well. And so I kind of feel like if you get the Xayah Rakan bot lane together, or maybe even just Xayah Leona or someone, then yeah, I think she can be pretty okay. And I'm definitely in favor of there being more viable AD carry picks, even if Kalista is probably still going to be up at the top. She, weirdly enough, like, she's banned like all the time, but she doesn't actually get picked very often because she's banned nearly all the time.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's good.
Yep. Well, Peter, I know you hate champions that are obnoxious to play against. So tell me, Zoe, how do you like these changes?
Uh, I still don't like Zoe's general design idea of like, but I guess it's in terms of degrees of obnoxiousness, this brings her down a little bit in terms of like, you've got a little bit more of an opportunity to position yourself in a slightly better way,
Mm-hmm.
and it happens a little bit less often. Actually, yeah, here's a good way of expressing it. So if you take let's build a formula here and say the amount of time you spend playing against Zoe, if we assume that that's pure obnoxiousness time,
Yeah.
and by her having a larger cooldown on her Sleepy Trouble bubble, that just reduces the amount of time when she does anything.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, like I'd say I have 4 more seconds per. If we say that it's being used on cooldown, which is probably not true, but let's say for each minute I play against Zoe, I get 4 more seconds every game where I can just be like, oh thank God. So yeah, I feel like right, I've really given me 12 times.
The freedom to not feel hated or shut down all the time.
I'm trying to
The
figure out
freedom
what.
to actually play the game. Congratulations, Peter.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, I mean, other people's kind of opinion on this was more like the Zoe. They need to really rework her kind of stolen abilities thing because Zoe. The thing is, like, I reckon one of the reasons why why Zoe even exists is because there's no clear idea of what a kind of like weird little pixie, like what kind of abilities a weird little pixie should have.
Mm-hmm.
So it gives them carte blanche to just kind of throw whatever stuff they had like on the big sort of board of let's try these champion ideas out onto her, and for it to all be acceptable because no one's like, I don't know, I guess she does, I guess pixies do get like random items and some of the spells. Like the big thing for her was like trying to find a way to kind of bring down the randomness because from what I understand, like some of them, like the redemption, can be super 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 good, while this other stuff can be kind of a bit blah. So I don't know, like I just even aside from her bubble, I feel like she's a problematic champion.
Yep, she certainly is. And as they write in the patch notes, it's mainly because of her spamminess of her E and of her Q. I agree that her W is a problem, but I think this is a good step to begin with, at least for the early game, taking or knocking the cooldown up by 4 seconds and then knocking it up by what's that, 3.5 afterwards. So basically, I think this is a good step to begin with, uh, but certainly not the last nerf we're gonna see. Now,
Okay, wait a sec.
sorry.
I just figured it out.
Okay, hit us.
Sleepy Trouble Bubble.
Hmm.
When someone's affected by Sleepy Trouble Bubble, they become targetable by your own team for auto attacks, and you can choose to auto attack someone to break them out of the Sleepy Trouble Bubble. Fixed. There you go. There you go, world. I fixed Zoe.
It's one idea at least. I can see that. It's kind of the
The one and only idea.
Yorick. It's the Yorick Cage treatment.
Sorry, the who treatment?
Yorick Cage treatment. Where
Oh, Yorick Cage, yes.
yeah.
Also, 120 seconds per game on average that I'm not spending having to worry about trouble bubbles. Thank you, Rap.
Nice. Well, moving on to the Tear of the Goddess line. Basically, this is targeted towards Ezreal. We don't want to see you go for Mana Moon and Archangel's Staff. So Ezreal, stop it now. You're not going to be allowed to do that anymore. So you're not going to be allowed to get that crazy shield and that huge amount of damage in the late game. Do I feel bad about this? Kinda. I like the idea of you being able to buy 2 tiers. Do I feel like it's justified? Yes.
Like
It made him too strong.
From everything I've read around the place, like it doesn't seem to be like people don't seem to be that down on Ezreal as a result of this. Like there's still lots of other stuff he could be building.
Sure. But I like the idea of you being able to have multiple ways of building Ezreal, going for the late game or going more for the early game with Hastings Gunblade, or going for mid game with Blade of the Ruined King, and just trying to get as much into that into your build as fast as possible. Yeah, but again, as I said, I feel like it's justified that they take this away from him.
Yeah, like, and I know because they made the whole thing about people being able to spam tiers in their inventories. I think from the patch note as written, that doesn't actually stop that from happening. But I'm assuming that from the discussion on Reddit, they were saying, they expected that to actually be the case, even though the way it's written, you can buy multiple tiers, but I assume that's not actually the case.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know.
Well, then continuing on with AD carry choices in terms of builds, Brawler's Gloves. I played a game here the other day, Counterfeit, and I was like, hey, why is my critical strike not going up? I bought 2 Brawler's Gloves, and it didn't make sense to me. And you know
Why
what?
did you buy 2 Brawler's Gloves?
Because I had the money for it. I wanted extra critical strike chance. And I'm like, I feel like it shouldn't be unique simply because Brawler's Gloves, they are so expensive now. It's what, like 600 or 800 gold. They're crazily expensive. So you're not going to be stacking a lot of them.
I believe the idea behind why they were made to be unique was because of the old Infinity Edge. So you could stack Brawler's Gloves and then end up with an enormous amount
exactly,
very quickly.
but you're not going to do that anymore because Infinity Edge has been changed. But even then, it costs so much that I would rather invest my money into, let's say, a pickaxe or a beer sword instead of stacking all of these Brawler Gloves. At least now, I think it wouldn't make sense to do so. But I can see why you would have multiple Brawler's Gloves, because I think it is used in the Phantom Dancer. You need multiple Brawler's Gloves, right?
I know they did change the recipe. Yeah,
so you need, in order to buy Phantom Dancer, you need 1 Brawler's Gloves, 1 dagger, and 1 seal. So it's basically targeted towards if you want to build a Phantom Dancer. Now you can buy 2 Brawler's Gloves and get the seal and the Phantom Dancer.
Yeah, I mean,
but even then, it was like 10 critical strike chance for, what was it, 800 gold or so, and it's 400 gold. So 400 gold, but the dagger was 300. So basically,
Can we just move on? I'm not sure.
It's a lot of gold for literally nothing. Okay, moving on to minion dematerializers. Also something I have a huge opinion on, but you go first, Peter, if you want to.
I have to admit, I'm not super knowledgeable on all of the interactions with the minion dematerializer, but
I have a video, guys, here on my YouTube if you want to watch it. It has a lot of views, over 10,000.
Wow, that's crazy. I hope you monetized it.
I have no idea how YouTube works, Peter.
Oh, actually, well, you just need a certain amount of subscribers and a certain amount of views, so you're probably closer to being able to monetize at least. Anyway, so going from 6 to 3 charges, I think isn't as damaging as that looks like that should be, because my understanding is that people would only use 3 or 4 of them meaningfully anyway. So, and the damage bonus is kind of whatever, and the fact it starts earlier, if anything, I'm not sure this feels like it changes a huge amount for me, but you probably got a much better idea than I do.
See, I like the minion dematerializer because of the utility it brings, or they bring rather. But
could you wait? Just for the rest of this, would you mind calling it the Dominion dematerializer? Because that way I can feel like Dominion's still a thing.
No. Dominion dematerializers. I feel like basically, I like the idea of you being able to use it in the laning phase, so you can get an extra damage and then save it later on for when you have super minions coming towards your base. Though I must say that I understand why they're taking it down, simply because 6 is too much. I think 4 would be a better number, so that you could still maintain the wave control in your laning phase, while not necessarily having charges later on. Though I
I
must say,
think that's
I think it's a good trade that they're giving the base damage and additional damage bonus, or knocking that up higher, and then taking down the charges.
well. To your point about the super minions, I think that's exactly it. I think that's the main thing that's changed here is that you just don't if you want to like I don't really see people holding on to them for the really late game, for like unless they've maybe like one of them. But I think that's specifically why is they don't want people to be able to neuter super minions in that kind of fashion. And I don't think I just don't see people like taking minion dematerializers and either just only using maybe they just use just two of them or something. But yeah, otherwise I think it's something that will get used up a lot earlier on.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I think that kind of covers it. I know you have some thoughts on overheal.
Yeah. Well, mainly just that I think when people are reading this, they're kind of maybe misinterpreting a little bit what it's actually doing, because it reads like you're losing out on like half the shield early on, which isn't the case at all. It's talking about how much of your healing goes into shielding, so it will take a bit longer for the shield to come up in the early going. But assuming you don't take a fight straight away and you just kind of farm for a little bit and you've got some lifesteal, I don't know how that equates to real terms, but I'm assuming it's not like it doesn't make it unviable. I guess it probably just means there's a few more auto attacks where before you start heavily trading. I don't know. I think it's still going to be pretty good with a support who's got any kind of healing. Though at the same time, I know that the relic shield has been kicked pretty hard, so maybe that's not so much of a thing unless you're playing with Nami or someone.
Yeah. Well, I don't have a lot to add to it. I think you kind of covered it, Peter. So, moving on to bounties, has been a big problem that people they gain a lead in the laning phase, and then they get a huge bounty. Now, it's been changed so that uh, if you lose your advantage, your minion and monster gold bounties will decrease, and support items now, or the gold you get from support items now also contributes towards minion and monster gold bounties.
Yeah, like I kind of feel like weirdly enough, I feel like the biggest change here, from most people's point of view, is actually the last one, the bounty visualization. That the gold bounty is now going to be more accurate, or like not sort of more accurate per se. But I feel like they underestimated that people wouldn't realize. What am I trying to say? So now it doesn't include the base gold in the bounty, whereas it made it look like someone was worth a lot more. So I feel like that was a lot more of a feel bad experience for a lot of people as they saw that somebody was worth 450, and they mentally added on the 300 because that's pretty logical, I think. If you're going to say someone is worth, because you always assume somebody's worth 300 gold.
Yeah.
And then, if it says, the 450 or something, it's fairly logical to assume that means it's, 750 total. But yeah, I think it's a good thing. Like in terms of real terms, that you get less punished for farming, and I think it's a small but significant thing that you can actually have your bounty decrease. Because I think if you fell behind, if you were doing really well and then you fell behind, like say you got ganked like a couple of times, your bounty, well, I'd assume you didn't get killed,
Yeah.
but you got driven out of lane, your bounty would stay up there, but now it can actually go back down again, which is,
Yeah.
I think,
So it also punishes the attacking team for not being able to complete the kill, which is good.
True.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think that's cool too. Ability proc consistency. Is there anything to add to that, Peter?
It's kind of hard to read. I feel like maybe they needed to do a video kind of explain this a little bit better. But I mean, it's just a bunch of stuff that will now interact with stuff like Leandry's, in a slightly different way.
Yeah.
Like the kind of stuff which just jumped out to me because I tend to like Malzahar. For instance, I think they've loosened up some of the restrictions on his voidlings, because I think from what I remember, Malzar's voidlings were a special case to not work with allies because it was too obnoxious.
Mm-hmm.
But I think they're trying to clean up some of that stuff there. So I'm generally in favor of anything that makes you able to look at how something works with one champion and then see a similar champion and be like, it should all work the same way with them as well. And
So they're just cleaning up. For example, if you look at you can compare Malzahar to Annie. Basically, now Malzahar's voidlings, they count as basic attacks. Annie's Tibbers, Tibbers' basic attacks counts as, or Tibbers' swipes counts as basic attacks, but the Fire Aura is classified as an ability hit and an AoE effect. So basically, they're just cleaning up a bunch.
I think the small change that's kind of easy to miss at the bottom there is that Victor's Q gets the on hit ability procs, on ability hit procs. So I don't know how significant that is, but I feel like that might be one of those.
Yeah, that could be a huge change. At least that means that you're going to be able to proc Lichbane more effectively.
I think he might have done. I'm not sure if he did that right. I don't play very much Victor. Maybe someone who knows can comment on it.
Well, see, I have played a lot of Victor, but I can't remember. It's been a long time since I've played Victor, and I kind of just, from what they're saying, which is empowered attack portion now activates on ability hit procs, it kind of just feels like it didn't do so before.
Yeah, I'm not super clear on it.
Yeah. Oh, and we're also having ranked being changed up again, so they're resetting that.
Well, they're giving up on positional ranking because people were just. I don't know quite how they didn't see it coming that people would just be jerks.
Yeah.
Like that was the big problem with it, is that people just kind of like treated it in the worst way they could have, but at the same time, like talking about the sort of game designer sort of point of view, it's like if you didn't expect people to take it to use it in the least positive way possible, then I think that was probably not very well thought through.
Yep. But I am looking forward to seeing people or it being resetted so that people will complain less, and so that we're gonna have the right people in the high ranks.
I'm sort of mixed about it because I wish it had worked out, but I understand why it didn't.
Yeah. Well, I think kind of that's it for the rest of the video. Do you have more to add, Peter, except let's not talk about skins?
Let's talk about skins. Oh my gosh, look at those adorable. The Corki, it's a Corki, and I'm a little concerned about Fizz though, because he literally doesn't look anything like Fizz anymore.
He looks like Nar.
Yeah, that's very visually confusing. And I mean, I'm actually tempted to get these because they're adorable. Apart from the Pretty Kitty Rengar, which just looks a bit lazy. But like the Meowric, actually no, Meowric just makes me look at Udyr, so forget that.
No, that looks like that looks like York.
I mean, it is Yorick, but it just makes him...
wait, sorry, I thought it was Maokai for a second.
No, that's because he's almost exactly the same as Meowkai.
Yeah.
But the Corgi one, I think is pretty cool. And that they're willing to put skins in that make a champion completely unrecognizable, I don't think is a good thing at all. I think that's a terrible idea. But hey, what can you do? Yeah. Probably not do that.
But yeah, Peter, do you have anything to add here for the end of the broadcast? Or not for the broadcast, but for the video?
Yeah, I think people seem to generally be relatively happy with the way the game is at the moment, and I think that's a good sign. I think all that's going to mean is eventually Riot are going to have to throw in some wrenches in the works. From what Freak was saying, I don't think there's going to be a proper mid-season update as it was. So I guess people are going to probably be okay with the game, which is actually surprisingly a relatively rare thing.
I think they were okay with the game last season towards the end. But yeah, anyways, thank you guys for watching. Obviously, you can find Peter's social media links below. You can find mine as well. And you can also find the video I've made about minion dematerializers here on my YouTube. So yeah, thank you guys for watching. Say goodbye, Peter.
Goodbye, Peter.
Goodbye, Peter.